After winning the lottery, I decided to hide it from my entire family. I asked for help and only one person reached out to me. I'm Marissa Calloway, 31 years old, living in a small town in Missouri. Most of my days were spent working double shifts at a diner just off the highway. The job barely paid enough to cover rent and bills, and I was always behind. My shoes had holes in the soles, my hands were cracked from scrubbing dishes, and my body ached every night when I crawled into bed. It wasn't the life I dreamed of, but it was the only one I had. My family never made things easier. My mom, Elaine, treated me like I was some kind of burden. My brother, Clayton, never missed a chance to call me a loser. My sister, Janelle, barely spoke to me unless she needed something. They all carried themselves like they were better than me, even though none of them had their lives together. Whenever I reached out, instead of comfort, I got judgment. They'd roll their eyes, make jokes at my expense, or simply ignore me. One evening, after a long shift, I stopped at the gas station on my way home. I don't even know why I bought the lottery ticket. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was desperation, or maybe just blind luck pulling me by the hand. I tossed it on the counter with a few crumpled singles and shoved it into my purse without thinking much of it. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same wobbly table I'd had since college, and scratched off the numbers. At first, I thought I was reading them wrong. I checked again, then again, my heart beating faster each time. Every number matched. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the official results, and there it was in bold letters, jackpot winner. The amount was $22 million. For a long moment, I just sat there in silence. My whole body went cold, like my brain couldn't process what was in front of me. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry, but the first emotion that hit me wasn't joy. It was fear. I saw Clayton storming into my life, demanding I hand over money for one of his sketchy business ideas. I saw Janelle showing up at my door, crying about her debt, trying to guilt me into paying it off. I heard Elaine's voice in my head, reminding me how much I owed her for raising me and how it was my duty to take care of her now. I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. They would bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell them. Not one of them. The money was mine, and I would protect it with everything I had. But before I touched a single dollar, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know who in my family would help me when they thought I had nothing. So I planned a small test. I would reach out, ask for just a little help, and see who stepped up. That choice changed everything. I decided to test my family slowly. I didn't want to ask for much, just enough to see who cared. So I picked a number that felt small but real, $150. I told myself it wasn't about the money at all. It was about the answer. I pretended that my utilities were behind and that I needed the loan until payday. It was simple, believable, and something most families would help with in a heartbeat. The first person I called was my mom. I kept my voice steady and explained that I was short on the bill this month and asked if she could lend me the money until next week. She was quiet for a moment, and I almost thought she might say yes. But then she sighed and said I should learn to budget better. Her tone wasn't soft or caring. It was sharp, almost like she was scolding a child. She reminded me that she wasn't a bank and that I had to stand on my own 2 feet. She ended the call before I could even respond. My chest felt heavy, but I told myself maybe my brother would be different. Clayton and I never got along well, but sometimes he pretended to care if he thought it made him look good. I dialed his number, and he answered sounding annoyed, like I was bothering him. When I explained what I needed, he laughed. Not a kind laugh, but one that stung. He said I was always a leech, and that if I didn't have my life together by now, I probably never would. Then he made a joke about me waiting tables until I was 50 and hung up before I could defend myself. The last person I tried was my sister Janelle. I sent her a text first, explaining the situation. No reply. I called her once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. I left a message, but she never returned it. Hours turned into the next day, and still nothing. She didn't even bother to pretend she cared. After those 3 attempts, I sat in my small living room, staring at my phone. My hands were cold, even though the room was warm. It wasn't about the $150. I could have pulled that out of my account without blinking. It was about knowing who would step forward when I asked for something so small, something that could have meant everything if I had truly been desperate. The truth was clear. My own mother wouldn't help. My brother mocked me like I was trash. My sister couldn't even answer the phone. Not one of them lifted a finger for me. Not one of them thought twice about leaving me to struggle. I realized in that moment just how alone I really was in my family. I didn't want to believe that every single person in my family would turn their back on me. So I reached out to one last person, my cousin Holly. She was younger than me, 29, and worked long nights as an ER nurse. We weren't especially close, but I remembered her being kind in ways the others weren't. She never joined in when my brother and sister made jokes about me, and she always had a smile when we bumped into each other at family gathering. I called her one afternoon, half expecting the same cold response I had already gotten. My voice shook a little as I told her I was in a tough spot and needed a short loan, just $150 to hold me over until payday. I braced myself for excuses or silence, but instead she answered right away with a soft laugh. "Don't worry about it, Marissa," she said. "Family's supposed to help each other." Her words hit me harder than I expected. No lecture, no judgment, no cruel jokes, just simple kindness. She didn't even ask why I needed the money. She just trusted me. Within an hour she sent it over, no hesitation, no strings attached. I stared at my phone for a long time after the notification came through, trying to remember the last time anyone in my family treated me like that. I paid her back as soon as I could, even though she told me not to rush. When I handed the money back, I thanked her more than once. She waved it off like it was nothing, but to me, it meant everything. That moment showed me the truth I had been searching for. She was the only one who cared enough to step up. It was then I made a choice I hadn't planned on. I decided to trust her with the secret that had been burning inside me since the night I checked the numbers on that ticket. I asked her to sit down with me, and I told her everything. My hands trembled as the words spilled out, about the gas station ticket, about how every number matched, about how much money it was. $22 million. For a second, Holly just stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was serious. Then she covered her mouth with her hand and whispered, "Oh my God." She looked at me with wide eyes, not with greed, not with jealousy, but with pure shock. When I explained why I kept it from the others, she nodded slowly, understanding without me having to spell it out. She leaned closer and said, "You don't have to worry, Marissa. I won't tell a soul. Your secret's safe with me." Holly became the one person I could count on, the only one I could talk to about the truth. In a family full of cold shoulders and sharp tongues, she became the quiet ally I never knew I needed. After Holly promised to keep my secret, I knew I had to be careful. The money was sitting safely in the bank, but I didn't want to do anything that would draw attention. So I bought a modest little house under a trust. It wasn't a mansion, nothing flashy, just a 2-bedroom with a small yard and a porch that caught the morning light. It was more than enough for me, and it gave me peace knowing it was mine. Nobody in my family could trace it back to me. Even with the house and money tucked away, I kept working part-time at the diner. The work was tiring, but I wanted my routine to stay the same. If I suddenly quit, people would start asking questions. My family would sniff around, and the last thing I needed was them wondering where my new fortune came from. So I tied my apron on, refilled coffee cups, and carried plates just like I always had. To anyone watching, I was still broke Marissa, the one barely scraping by. Family dinners were the hardest part. Sitting around that table, listening to the same voices that once ignored me, made my stomach twist. My mother would glance at me with that same look of disappointment, as if she were embarrassed that I hadn't done better with my life. My brother Clayton would crack jokes about me being stuck at the diner forever. Janelle would toss in little digs, pretending to be sweet while reminding everyone how much more she claimed to have accomplished. They laughed at me for wasting my life, for not being ambitious, for being the one who never quite measured up. They didn't know I was wealthier than all of them put together. They didn't know that while they mocked me for the job I kept, I had a key in my pocket to a house that was mine free and clear, and a bank account so full it still didn't feel real. The words stung, but I didn't let it show. I kept my head down and played my part. I let them believe I was the struggling waitress, because that was easier than letting them see the truth. Their laughter, their gossip, their smugness. It was almost funny once I thought about it. They had no idea the person they looked down on was sitting quietly on a secret that would change everything. Each time I left those dinners, I felt a strange mix of anger and satisfaction. Anger because of the way they treated me, satisfaction because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't broke anymore. And while they sat there mocking me, I was already planning what to do with the life they thought I'd never have. I started to wonder what would happen if I gave my family the smallest hint that my life might be changing. I didn't tell them anything solid, just a few vague words here and there. At one dinner, I mentioned I was looking into a new opportunity. Another time I said I might have something in the works. I never gave details, but it was enough to catch their attention. It didn't take long for the shift to happen. My phone, which they usually ignored, suddenly wouldn't stop buzzing. Clayton was the first to jump in. He called 3 times in one day, and when I finally picked up, he sounded friendlier than I'd heard him in years. He talked about some trucking business he wanted to start, painting it like a golden chance for both of us. But the more he explained, the more it sounded like a scam. He didn't have a plan, just big promises and a demand for cash. Every time I tried to change the subject, he circled back, pushing harder. His sudden warmth felt less like care and more like calculation. Janelle, who hadn't answered my calls when I really needed her, began inviting me over. She'd pour me coffee, ask how I was doing, and act as if she'd suddenly become the sister I'd always wished for. But the mask slipped quickly. She dropped hints about her credit card bills, the stress of late payments, how the interest was killing her. She didn't ask directly, but her eyes did. Every sentence was a fishing line tossed into the water, hoping I'd bite. Then came my mother. Elaine cornered me after one meal, her voice heavy with guilt tripping. She spoke about how hard it was to keep the family afloat, about rising grocery prices and house repairs. She said it was time I stepped up, that everyone had to pitch in when times were tough. But I knew what she really meant. It wasn't about the family, it was about her. She wanted money, and she wanted it now. I sat back and listened to all of them, each one trying their own way to pry open the door they thought I had unlocked. It didn't feel like love. It didn't feel like family. It felt like vultures circling, waiting for me to slip. Their kindness wasn't real. The sudden interest in my life wasn't real. It was all about what they thought they could take from me. As I smiled and nodded through their conversations, a bitter clarity settled in my chest. They didn't care about me. They cared about opportunity. My so-called family had no problem ignoring me when I needed a hand, but the second they thought I had something to give, they came running. I decided to push things further. Instead of dropping hints here and there, I planned a dinner at my new house. I wanted to see what they would do if I gave them a little piece of the truth, but not the whole story. I cooked a meal, set the table, and tried to keep my nerves steady as I waited for them to arrive. When everyone finally sat down, the mood felt strange. My mother looked around the place, her eyes sharp like she was trying to figure out how I could afford it. Clayton kept tapping the table with his fingers, restless. Janelle smiled too wide, her voice syrupy sweet. They were all pretending, and I could feel it before I even opened my mouth. Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat and said I needed to share something. I told them I had come into some money. I didn't say how much. I kept my words vague on purpose, because I wanted to see their reactions. For a second, the table went quiet. Then it was like the air cracked open. Clayton leaned forward, his eyes shining in a way that made my skin crawl. He started talking fast, almost tripping over his own words. He said this was perfect timing because he had a business idea, a trucking company that was going to make millions. He insisted all he needed was some startup money, and with me on board, it would be unstoppable. He made it sound like a golden ticket, but I could tell it was nothing more than another one of his schemes. Before I could even respond, Janelle jumped in. She put on her best sad face, her voice soft and shaky. She said she had been drowning in credit card debt, that the interest was crushing her, and that she didn't know what else to do. She didn't even try to hide the point. She wanted me to pay it off for her. Then my mother spoke, and her words cut deeper than that. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, telling me I owed her. She reminded me of every sacrifice she ever made, every time she fed me or kept a roof over my head, as if those weren't just the things parents are supposed to do. She said it was time I gave back to the family, that helping them should be my duty now that I had money. I sat there listening, my stomach twisting. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them asked how this money came into my life, or what I wanted to do with it. They only saw dollar signs. When I hesitated, their smiles dropped. The kindness faded fast. Clayton's voice grew sharp, accusing me of being selfish. Janelle muttered that I was heartless. My mother's face hardened, her disappointment heavy and cruel. In that moment, I saw their true faces. A few days later, I found out that Clayton had tried to break into my house. He was looking for my financial papers, and the thought of him sneaking around my home made me shiver. It felt like such a violation of my life and everything I had worked for. I realized then how little some people respected me and how far they were willing to go to control me. It was frightening, but it also lit a fire in me. I couldn't let anyone underestimate me. Then I started hearing whispers around town, and I quickly realized what was happening. Janelle had been spreading lies about me, saying I had only gotten rich because of some relationship with an older man. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't the truth, but that didn't make it hurt any less. People I barely knew began looking at me differently, some with pity, some with judgment, and some with quiet amusement. I felt betrayed. I had trusted people to be fair, to see the truth, but instead, they chose gossip and cruelty. The next blow came in the form of a letter from Elaine. I had expected tension or criticism, but nothing could have prepared me for the venom in her word. She accused me of tearing the family apart, blaming me for every fight and misunderstanding that had ever happened. I read the letter again and again, feeling my chest tighten with anger and hurt. I couldn't believe someone I cared about could write something so cruel. For a moment, I felt like everything around me was collapsing. I was heartbroken and betrayed in ways I hadn't thought possible. But as the initial shock faded, a new feeling took its place: determination. I realized they had made a mistake underestimating me. I wasn't going to let lies and threats control my life. I wasn't going to let them think they could break me. They would regret ever trying to hurt me or question my strength. I took a deep breath and promised myself I would rise above it all. I would show them that I was stronger than their gossip, their threats, and their accusations. I would protect myself, my life, and everything I had worked so hard for. They had pushed me to my breaking point, but that point didn't destroy me. Instead, it woke something fierce inside me, something they would never be able to crush. I was ready to prove that I was not someone to be underestimated. With Holly's help, I came up with a plan. I told my family there would be a meeting with an inheritance lawyer. I promised them I would be fair and share the money properly. I made it sound official and serious, so they would all show up, eager to claim what they thought was theirs. I could see the excitement on their faces when they arrived, the smugness and confidence that they would get their cut. As soon as everyone was in the room, I stayed calm and let them settle in. Then I did something they would never expect. I played audio recordings I had collected over months. Every insult, every piece of gossip, every cruel word they had said about me was there for them to hear. Their voices filled the room, echoing all the lies and betrayals they had tried to hide. I watched their expressions change from smugness to shock, and then to guilt. It was satisfying to see them confronted with the truth in a way they could not deny. After the recordings ended, I looked at them and spoke clearly, without anger but without hesitation. I told them they would receive nothing. I reminded them that I owed them nothing. Every word they had spoken against me, every attempt to hurt me, every betrayal, they had given me nothing but pain and disrespect. I didn't need to be fair to people who had shown no fairness to me. My words hung in the air, and I could see the realization settle on their faces. They had expected an easy gain, but instead, they were met with the consequences of their own actions. I felt a strange mix of relief and strength as I saw the truth hit them. For so long, I had held my feelings inside, trying to be patient and polite. But now, I had set the record straight in the only way that mattered. I didn't need their approval, and I didn't need to share anything with people who had only tried to hurt me. I had turned the tables, and it felt like a heavy weight lifting off my shoulders. Holly smiled at me quietly, proud but knowing this was my moment. I didn't need anyone else's support right now. I had created the trap, and it had worked perfectly. My family had walked right into it, thinking they were clever, and I had shown them exactly what they had done to me. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was claiming the power that had been denied to me for too long. By the end of the meeting, I felt unstoppable. I had taken control, and nothing anyone said could change that. I had faced their lies, their betrayal, and their selfishness, and I had come out stronger. I had shown them that trying to take advantage of me was a mistake. I had proven that I could protect myself, that I could think ahead, and that I was not someone to be underestimated. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. Clayton couldn't believe what had happened. He flew into a rage, shouting and threatening me, but security quickly stepped in and forced him out. I watched him go, chest tight with a mix of fear and satisfaction. He had always thought he could scare me, but now he realized that I wasn't someone to intimidate anyone. Then Janelle started crying, fake tears rolling down her cheeks as she begged for forgiveness. She acted as if she had suddenly realized the pain she had caused me. I looked at her calmly, remembering all the times she had ignored me when I needed help. I remembered the time I had asked her for just $150, and she had turned me away without a second thought. I could see the shock on her face when I reminded her I didn't need her false sympathy, and I certainly wasn't going to let her rewrite history to make herself look better. Elaine, however, was different. She cursed me, calling me a disgrace of a daughter, her words sharp and full of anger. I could feel the weight of her hatred, but I didn't let it touch me. I had heard enough accusations, insults, and lies to last a lifetime. I stood there calm, composed, and stronger than ever before. I looked at my mother and said firmly, "No, Mom. I just finally stopped being your doormat." The words felt like a release, like a long-held breath finally leaving my lungs. I didn't need to explain further. My actions had already shown them I was no longer the person they could manipulate or dismiss. I had taken control of my life, my choices, and my dignity, and nothing they said could take that away. For the first time, I felt completely in control. The fear, the betrayal, the lies, they were all behind me now. I had faced each of them and emerged stronger, unshaken by their threats or anger. I realized that revenge wasn't about hurting them physically or speaking cruelly. It was about showing them that their power over me was gone. I had set boundaries, defended myself, and reclaimed my strength. As they left, I didn't feel triumph in a bitter way. Instead, I felt calm, like someone who had finally found peace after a storm. Clayton, Janelle, and Elaine had all tried to push me down, but now I stood tall. I didn't need their approval, their forgiveness, or their love. I had proven to myself that I could face anything, that I could stand up for myself, and that I was finally free from the people who had tried to control me. I walked away from that room with my head held high. I didn't just survive their anger and lies. I had turned their attacks into a moment of strength. I had shown them, without cruelty or revenge in the usual sense, that I was no longer someone they could hurt. I had finally claimed my life for myself. I decided to cut all ties with my immediate family. After everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the threats, I realized I didn't need people in my life who had never cared about me. It was hard at first to let go of the idea of family, but deep down, I knew it was the right choice. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a freedom I hadn't felt in years. With part of my winnings, I made a choice that felt much more meaningful. I helped Holly pay off her student loans and even bought her a home. Seeing her smile, knowing that I could give her security and peace, filled me with a happiness that no money could have bought otherwise. It wasn't about showing off or making anyone jealous. It was about supporting someone who had always been there for me, someone who had never judged or betrayed me. As we spent more time together, Holly and I built something I had never experienced with my blood family. We created a bond based on trust, loyalty, and love. We became a chosen family, stronger than anything tied by birth. We shared our dreams, our fears, and our laughter. Every moment with her reminded me that family doesn't have to be defined by blood. It's about the people who stand by you, the ones who make life better simply by being there. I felt my life shift in ways I hadn't expected. I no longer worried about betrayal or gossip. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't to gain approval. Instead, I focused on building a life filled with honesty, kindness, and real connection. Helping Holly gave me a purpose beyond myself, and her presence reminded me that love can be found in the most unexpected places. In quiet moments, I reflected on everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I had lost a family that had never truly cared about me, that had tried to use me or hurt me when I was vulnerable. But in losing them, I had gained something far more valuable. A true companion in Holly, a life of loyalty and peace, and the satisfaction of knowing I had finally chosen the right people to surround myself with. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. I wasn't defined by my past or by the people who had failed me. I was defined by my choices, my actions, and the love I gave and received in return. My life had taken a new shape, and it felt stronger, safer, and happier than I had ever imagined. I didn't look back with regret. I didn't mourn the family that had never been there for me. Instead, I focused on the life I was building, one grounded in trust, loyalty, and love. I had finally found the family I deserved, and that was worth more than anything I had lost. What would you do if your family betrayed you? Would you forgive them or walk away like Marissa? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. If you love stories about courage, trust, and finding real family, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.